I can't believe it's over. Our watch has ended. Alright, for those of you who don't know, I didn't get into Game of Thrones until after season 6 was over. Yeah, it was pretty late. So if my opinions on what happened in this last season are different from yours if you got into it, like, earlier, that's the reason for it. And spoiler alert, I'm gonna talk about the spoilers because how can I not? Come on, it's the end game. I mean, not... you know. Game of Thrones, Season 8. The final season, now Game of Thrones is over. No more new episodes of Game of Thrones. It's been like a year and a half, probably more than a year and a half, since our last season. Season 7 ended with the big ice wall being broken down by the Night King on the dragon, and so the White Walkers were marching into Westeros. So now we all have to gather our forces and take on the dead army, and also Cersei is still in King's Landing. We gotta take her out too. I mean, that's the basic premise of this season is, you know, the big wrap-up to everything. Of course, the end of everyone's story. Arya, Jon Snow, Daenerys, Cersei, Tyrion. And this was a divisive season, to say the least. There were some fans who were just pissed off beyond belief. I mean, yeah, it's 6 episodes, and seasons 1 through 6 of Game of Thrones were 10 episodes each. Season 7 was 7 episodes, and season 8 was 6 episodes. I honestly don't know why. I think they both should have been 10 episodes, because one of the biggest complaints I've heard about this season is that it felt rushed, and I have to agree, this season did feel pretty rushed, but it was split up, you know, like, I felt like this season there were like sections of it. Like, the first 2 episodes were the build-up, you know, sitting down and talking in Winterfell, preparing for the dead army's arrival. And I did like them, you know, like families reunited, Jon Snow and Daenerys, they arrive at Winterfell, and Sansa and Arya, they see the dragons for the first time, and you can see the expressions on their faces. They're like, oh my god, they're real. I was like, yeah, they've never seen dragons before. That's cool. Basically, the first episode was like re-establishing for those of you who forgot where we were, and then the second episode was like preparing for war. I did like Brienne's knighting scene though. I think it's like what, Jaime, Tyrion, and Tormund, and Brienne, they're all sitting by the fire, and when Jaime gets up and he knights Brienne, that was a really heartfelt scene. I was like, yeah, good for her. And, you know, you could tell she's living a dream. And meanwhile, Tormund's all like, giant's milk tits. He's weird. But episode 3, The Long Night, holy shit. That episode was, I thought it was great. And it's funny, because I was actually in Boston while this episode aired. I was there to see Avengers with my old college friends. So I was watching this episode with my brother who doesn't watch Game of Thrones. We were just watching it in his room, and like, it was funny to see his reactions to stuff that happened in that episode, because it was like, what would it be like to just watch a random episode of the show without any context? That and the fact that the episode was so damn dark. For a few minutes I thought it might have been his monitor, because my brother's monitor, like, it's a really good monitor for gaming, but for videos, I was like, it could be better. But no, it turns out that it was just dark that way on purpose. Because the first thing you see is you see all the Dothraki army, they go in with their lighted torches that the Red Woman, she just lit them all on fire with her prayer or whatever, and they just ride off into battle, and you just see all these lights go out, like, one by one in the dark. That was great. I was like, oh, okay. So, like, this is serious. This episode had some horror elements in there, too. Like, when Arya was in the room, I think it was, like, the library or something, and she was hiding from these White Walkers, I was like, this kind of feels like a horror movie. It's claustrophobic. Arya had to go through a lot this season. I'll get to her moments later on. We all knew that a few people had to die in this episode because it was the big climactic battle against the White Walkers. Jorah, for example, that was sad. That made me so sad. Jorah was a great character. You know, he was so loyal to Daenerys to the last breath, literally. And when he was dying, Daenerys was crying over him, and Drogon, like, kneels down and just kind of wraps them up, and the shot, it's a great shot. I love the pullback shot. I was like, yeah, this is hitting me. Like, it's sad. And Theon's death. Theon's death could have been a lot better. Like, you know, he and his army, they're protecting Bran by the tree, and Theon looks to Bran. Bran's like, you're a good man. Thank you. I was like, okay, so Theon's just gonna charge at the Night King and die? Like, for no reason? Yeah, that's what happens. He just goes, ah, and the Night King just picks him up and stabs him, and he's dead. Didn't Theon know he was about to die? Like, come on, he stood no chance. I don't know, I just felt like it could have been better. It could have been more meaningful or something, I don't know. But then the greatest moment in the entire show comes right after that, where the Night King is about to attack Bran, and Arya just comes out of nowhere, comes right up behind him, and then the Night King picks her up, but then she drops her knife into the other hand, gets him in the knee, and I guess that was his weak spot, because he just combusts into ice flakes. My brother and I, we were both like, oh! I knew I made a good choice in making Arya my favorite character, because that was badass. Her story arc in this entire season is probably my favorite thing in this entire season, because before this episode, like in episode 2, she had that sex scene with Gendry where people were like, ooh. I was like, she's only a couple years younger than me. I have no problem with it. She's really attractive. And again, I didn't get into this show until late, so that's a factor too. And it's funny, Gendry, like after that, he was like, I love you now, let's get married. And she turns him down flat. She's like, you can't hold me down. I was like, all right, you know, you tried, Gendry. You kind of overdid it, but you tried. So Arya gets hers, and then she kills the Night King. She's doing pretty well in this season so far. And then episode 4 was more build-up, you know, or stopping, taking a breath before we head over to King's Landing. Jaime Lannister takes Brienne's virginity. I thought that was really nice of him. I heard some people say that there was like a love story between Jaime and Brienne. I never felt that up until, like, I still haven't really felt it. I really just felt like they were really close friends, but never like lovers. I felt like in episode 4, he was just doing her a solid before he left for King's Landing. And then when Daenerys is flying, I think it was Rhaegon. No, it was Drogon. Because you see Rhaegon get shot out of the sky by this big like harpoon thing from the Hobbit movies. You're like, oh, holy shit, now Dany only has one dragon left. Because that fucking Euron Greyjoy, man, that guy is a dick. Like, every few seasons of Game of Thrones had their huge dick character. First it was Joffrey, then it was Ramsay, then it was Euron. Euron Greyjoy, man. He has this big fight with Jaime Lannister, which that was a pretty intense fight, and Euron, like, stabs Jaime a few times, and Jaime still walked away from that? Nah, I don't feel like he would have been able to walk away from that. Jaime ends up winning the fight, and then Euron, like, he looks right at the camera, and he's like, I'm the man who killed Jaime Lannister. After the end of this season, I'm like, no, you're not. But really not the meat of the season, but like, you know, the most recent episodes were the thing that we're gonna talk about the most here. I mean, episodes 1, 2, and 3, I thought they were good. Episode 4, I don't really remember much of it other than Jaime doing Brienne a solid. But episode 5, they get to King's Landing after Missandei got her head cut off by the mountain. That sucked. We knew one of them was gonna die because they had that love scene where they were like, we're gonna go away together and live our lives. We were like, oh, that's classic setup for someone to die. And we were all predicting it was gonna be Grey Worm. But no, Missandei ended up getting captured by the Lannisters. And Cersei was like, bend the knee or she dies. And Tyrion tried to convince Cersei with all of his words. He should have known, yeah, Tyrion's intelligence kind of went down this season. He was so loyal to Daenerys, it was like compromising his intelligence. Because he was trying to convince Cersei that Daenerys is the better queen, and everyone was like, Cersei's not gonna... Come on. Cersei was not going to give up her throne by any means. So they cut Missandei's head off. And I was like, yeah, that's sad for Grey Worm, but I mean, come on, Tyrion. It wasn't going to go down any other way. But when Daenerys arrives at King's Landing on Drogon, she gets this look on her face. I've never seen her make that face before. At least I don't remember seeing her make that face before. Right from that facial expression, I was like, this is not gonna be good. Because we knew throughout the season up to this point, she was starting to lose it a little bit. She was becoming so power hungry for that throne. She was like, we are taking it and we're going to rid the world of tyrants. She was unaware of how much she was becoming one herself. That really shows in the last episode, but in this episode, she gets that look on her face and she just destroys King's Landing. We're not just talking sets fire to a few blocks. No, she destroys the entire city, and that wouldn't be so bad if there weren't millions of innocent people in there. I mean, they even rang the surrender bells. Like, Cersei was holding off to the last minute, but she did surrender. And Daenerys just attacked the city anyway? Nah, she is straight up a villain now. She could have just gone up to the castle and killed Cersei, and she probably would have been justified in doing that. But no, she just massacres this entire city, and again, this episode was really well done production-wise. You know, these things are always shot on location, and they just destroyed this city, and Arya's right in the middle of it, because she went there with the Hound, and she's seeing all these innocent families get burned alive, and she's trying to save this mother and her daughter, and then they both die. Throughout that episode, I was like, I hope Arya doesn't die. I hope Arya doesn't die. Please live through it. And I'm so glad she did live through it. The Hound, on the other hand, I knew that there was going to be a big epic battle between him and his brother. That fight was pretty epic too, I'm not gonna lie. The Mountain, Gregor Clegane, like, he's become like this zombie, whatever the hell he is. Like, the Hound stabs him through the chest, he just takes his sword out and continues to fight him. I was like, holy crap, how the hell is the Hound going to beat this guy, if he does? But it turns out he just forces him over the edge, and so they just both fall into the fire, and so they're both dead now. I was like, alright, you know what? I mean, it could have been, you know, not rushed, but it is a good ending for them, I think. Because the Hound was like, this is the only way I'm gonna be able to kill this motherfucker. So alright, fine send-off. But Jaime and Cersei's death was underwhelming for me. It just was. Because Jaime betrayed, I thought he was going through a really good story arc. He was like, I fight for the living, I always will. But no, he just betrays everything, he leaves everything behind, he goes back to Cersei, and they're going to escape together, but then, you know, the entrance is blocked off by all that rubble, so they just embrace each other, and they just get crushed by 1,000,000 feet of rock. And so now they're both dead. I was like, oh, okay, well, I thought someone was going to kill Cersei, you know, I was looking forward to seeing who gets to stab her or whatever. It could have been Jaime or Arya or Daenerys or whoever, but no, in the end, no one gets to kill Cersei, they just die because the ceiling falls on them. That's just kind of lame. And then Arya, having survived the attack, she finds that white horse and then she rides off, and that's it. And then we get to the finale of Game of Thrones, which had a lot of shit going on. Like, Tyrion finds his dead siblings underneath all the rubble and he cries. That was a good scene. Because he's had his quarrels with both of them in the past, but in the end, they were his family. But Daenerys has taken over the Seven Kingdoms, however briefly. She's giving this speech in Valyrian. She's like, we will not stop. The war is not over until everyone is liberated. We We will rid the world of tyrants. I was like, this girl is worse than Cersei at this point. She has become the very thing she sought to destroy. And now everyone knows it. Jon knows it, Tyrion knows it, and yeah, now everyone knows that Jon is the true heir to the Iron Throne. He's Aegon Targaryen, he's the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. Everyone knows it, and they've been saying, yeah, he's gonna be a threat to Daenerys. She's gonna have him killed next after Tyrion. And so the scene, the great scene where Daenerys sees the Iron Throne and then Jon shows up, I love this scene, actually. I thought it was so well done. Because Jon is trying to convince her, no, what you did was not right. But she's so blind, she's like, yes, it is. I know what is good. And Jon's like, what about everyone else who thinks they know what is good? And Daenerys responds, they don't get to choose. And throughout the entire season, Jon was like, I am loyal to Daenerys. I don't want the Iron Throne. She's my queen. Even after the massacre, he's like, I'm loyal to Daenerys. I was like, oh my god, dude. How can you be so blind? So in this scene where he just looks at her and he's like, you will always be my queen. And they kiss. And I was like, is he gonna stab her right now? And right after I asked that question, I hear this sink. I was like, all right, that answered my question. And Emilia Clarke's acting is really good right here. Because she looked down and yeah, Jon stabbed her in the heart. She gives him this look of just confusion. Like, what just happened? I thought you said you were loyal to me. And then the light goes out in her eyes and she dies. That's the death of Daenerys Targaryen. I thought it was pretty well done. Because even Jon like breaks down and starts crying. Because yeah, even though they both knew they were related, they were still in love. But the scene doesn't end there. Drogon shows up and Drogon's like, Mom, like you can tell the way he reacts to Daenerys' death. I thought it was also really well done. Because he like nudges her a little bit and he realizes that she's dead. He sees Jon, figures out that Jon's the one that did it. And then he just sets fire to the Iron Throne, and you see the Iron Throne just melt. I was like, yeah, you know what? That's symbolic, because the Iron Throne is what caused all of this. So set that damn thing ablaze. Yeah, good stuff. And then he just takes Daenerys' body and flies off, and that's the last you see of him. Lord knows where they're going. I'm pretty sure Bran will figure it out. And so after that, they have to decide who will lead Westeros into a better future. I was like, Jon Snow, easy. But of course, Game of Thrones has to give you that shock factor, give you the unexpected. So they're all sitting in this council, and Tyrion was a prisoner, you know, for betraying Daenerys. He's like, let me talk. Here's what I think should happen with Westeros now. And I'll be honest with you, I was loving this season of Game of Thrones. You know, it had some flaws, sure, but I was still like, no, Game of Thrones is still great up until this point. Because Tyrion is like, we need someone wise to lead Westeros. And it's funny, because Sam was like, what if the power of the people just belonged to the people? I was like, aw, man, are we gonna do this democracy thing? Like, is this show just gonna be a political statement? That's all it's leading to? Seriously? But no, they just kind of laugh that off, and I'm like, all right, phew. I didn't want Game of Thrones to be just a big political statement, paralleling our world. I didn't want that for Game of Thrones. So Tyrion recommends someone else to lead Westeros, and he picks Bran. Bran? Fucking Bran? Are you fucking kidding me? Right when he said his name, I was like, no. And it's funny, as soon as his name was mentioned, my brother, who's home for the summer, he was watching it with us, and he was like, lame. I was like, yeah, lame. Because Bran, he's a fine character, but honestly, he was the least interesting out of all of them. At one point, Tyrion was like, who has a better story than Bran the Broken? I was like, well, let's see. Well, there's Arya, there's Jon Snow, there's anyone. They all have better stories than Bran. Tyrion looks at Bran, he's like, you down? And Bran just responds, why do you think I came all this way? I was like, oh my god. Oh my god. I mean, honestly speaking, I don't think Bran would be a bad ruler. He's just not that interesting of a character. If he were actually interesting and showcased some emotion after becoming the Three-Eyed Raven, then we probably all would have been a little more fine with it. As it stands, there we have it. I do like that Tyrion becomes his hand though, because he was hand of the queen, and then the queen died, so he becomes hand of the new king. Tyrion's not a complete idiot. He still has some wisdom in there. But Sansa's decision to keep the North independent, I like that too, because then she becomes the queen in the North. Sansa's an awesome character. She really is. She's had problems with everyone in the show, so she deserves to have what's hers. And at the end of the episode where everyone's going, Queen in the North, Queen in the North, I was like, yeah, go Phoenix. So I like how her story was wrapped up. But the way Jon Snow's story wrapped up, I gotta be honest, I was like, I don't like that at first. Because he and Tyrion are talking, and Tyrion's like, they're gonna send you back to the Wall, to the Night's Watch. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Back to the Night's Watch? The least interesting part of Jon's whole story arc in the entire show was when he was at the Night's Watch. Or at least that's my opinion. And so they're gonna send him back like nothing's changed? But apparently I didn't think it all the way through. Because now the purpose of the Night's Watch is over. It was, you know, to defend Westeros against the White Walkers, but now the White Walkers are all gone. And you see Jon Snow lead the Night's Watch beyond the Wall, and I was like, okay, so really Jon Snow was the first or second king beyond the wall. The Night's Watch has ended, so now they're probably just going to explore north. So I was like, alright, I'm sure Jon would want that more than the Iron Throne. So good for him, alright, fine. But of course the ending of my favorite character's story arc is why this character is my favorite character. Arya Stark, she decides, you know what, I'm just gonna leave everything, I'm gonna sail west of Westeros because that's where the maps end. I'm gonna see what's out there. I was like, yeah, alright, cool. And when Arya's just on that ship, and I was like, alright, I'm hearing Pirates of the Caribbean music in my head. Dun, 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 dun. I want an Arya spin-off show. Let's do it, because I want to see what she sees. I want her story to continue, because she's just awesome. I don't care how you do it. It could be live action show on HBO, it could be animation on YouTube. I don't care. Because there were some loose ends. You know, Bran said he could probably find Drogon. What's gonna happen with that? I don't know. And honestly, the end of the show, it reminded me of Lord of the Rings, right down to the fact that they wrote a book called A Song of Ice and Fire. I was like, they did the exact same thing in Lord of the Rings, you know, where they had a book and he was calling it Lord of the Rings. Not that that's a bad thing, it's a good way to end a story like this. So yeah, in the end, Sansa is queen in the north, Jon Snow is king beyond the wall, Arya is sailing west to find out what's out there, and Bran is the new king of the Six Kingdoms. And that is the end of Game of Thrones. In the end, I didn't hate this season as much as a lot of other people did. It certainly had its flaws, to be sure. It was very rushed. It didn't have that subtlety that the first few seasons had. I just wonder why these last two seasons were shorter. I feel like if they were 10 episodes each, they would have been a lot better. Or at least the fans wouldn't have as much of a problem with them. But I still had a good time with Game of Thrones. Production-wise, it's still the most visually impressive TV show I've ever seen. The dragons still look amazing. The music, Ramin Djawadi, my God, he's awesome. The last two episodes in particular had some really good music. I can't wait to listen to the soundtrack. It's gonna be great. So yeah, in conclusion, Game of Thrones, I do wish I'd gotten into it sooner than I did, but hey, we can't all be so lucky. It is an experience, it's worth watching. I know people who don't watch the show, and I'm like, you should watch Game of Thrones. I feel like everyone who is mature enough should watch Game of Thrones. They may not like how it ends, but they're not gonna regret watching it. I don't regret watching Game of Thrones. It's a fantastic show. The proof is in all the Emmys it's won. As far as prequel projects goes, because I know HBO's working on a Game of Thrones prequel show, I don't know if it'll be as interesting, because I'm usually like that about prequels to begin with, but give me my Arya spin-off show. That's what I want to see. So Game of Thrones Season 8, have you watched it? What did you think about it? And what do you think about the entirety of Game of Thrones? What do you think they should do in the future? And do you want an Arya spin-off show as much as I do? Admit it. Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe.